Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us on the strategy session. It's a real treat tonight. Joe and I are with one of my favorite writers, one of the more fascinating people, I think, on the American scene, Stephen Beschloss. If you don't subscribe to his Substack, America, you should correct that mistake right away. There's a lot of de Tocqueville in what Stephen writes. His sort of summation of what's going on in America, and um, in a world in which a lot is said about some of the same subjects, I think Stephen's take on it is just, I never know exactly what he's going to say, and it's always interesting. Fascinating guy. Wrote a book that everybody should also read. Sometime I want to hear how you ended up writing this, Stephen.
There is a story.
It was one of these books I read years ago, and it was only until maybe a year ago I realized you're the same Stephen Beschloss who wrote the book. It was like,
there aren't that many of us. That's true.
It was fascinating.
Really good.
And Joe, who for reasons none of us can really understand, came back from France, where his mom lives, when he has an excuse that he could probably stay. But we're glad you did, Joe. Good to have you back, man.
It's good to be back, man. Good to
I asked him what he liked most about America, and he says we have better internet in France. So that was pretty much it.
Yeah.
So Stephen, if you and I were talking a year ago, which we probably were, and we had said a year from now we're going to have an army of masked men chasing gardeners through Brentwood, with racial profiling being apparently legal by the Supreme Court, with a budget larger than the Marines, a budget larger than any but two militaries of any country in the world. That the Republican Party, which is in terror and shock about a guy running for mayor who's talking about maybe 5 city-owned grocery stores, has now nationalized Intel, which, and we have tanks in the streets of DC and a president who's playing out some sort of boy's fantasy of what it's like to be a man, talking about invading other American cities. I think most people probably would have thought that we lost it, but
we have.
We have lost. But here we are. Stephen, is this? This is a question I just have to ask. Is this pretty much what you expected? Worse than you expected?
It's kind of it's what I expected, and I have to say that I went back and checked. So it's September. That's a year ago. Wasn't that long before the election? It was already possible to read Project 2025. It was already possible to pay attention to Trump talking about how he was going to, attack the lunatic Democrats. Then that was sort of on the plate. I'm pretty sure if I went back through my writing in that period and it was just tracking what was going on, I'm pretty sure I detailed all of what you described, except maybe not taking over Intel. Other than that, I mean, all of those things were pretty much what he promised, which is why this all is so alarming, because it was so knowable. I think the thing that's most disturbing in terms of what I didn't expect, I expected the fecklessness of the Republicans, the capitulation. It's not a surprise. The Supreme Court had already immunized him, so it was already clear that they were going to roll over and pretty much do whatever he wanted. I think what I didn't fully expect was how many other how many billionaires, how many companies, how many universities, how many important people, tech world, let's add that in. I didn't anticipate the level of capitulation. And that's been, I think, probably the most disappointing part of this whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, Joe, I was thinking about this. The boards of all these major tech companies, had you asked him, would it be okay if your CEO met in public with a convicted felon? they all would have said, no, we'll get rid of the CEO if he does that. And yet here we have this sort of gathering of the Klan with a convicted felon.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I saw a lot of the stuff that you were writing at the time, and of course, Project 2025, and it was, like you said, it was out there in full view. What I didn't see was the, Department of War and declaring war on Chicago, literally that far out. I mean, that out there. I mean, that sort of, like you'd think that I mean, it just so out there in full view of everybody, and still the capitulation.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely, I'm sure that I wrote about, troops in the streets, because he was already talking about wanting to use the military to achieve his ends. And, and we know in the first term that he, was trying to get Mark Esper, the defense secretary, to, to shoot protesters in the legs. So all of the network of people that surrounded him then, that provided some thin version of guardrails, all gone, and now just miscreants and sycophants and people who are ready to do whatever it is that he wants, and that's the combustible incendiary combination that lets a guy who's obviously mentally unwell, deranged, and desperate in lots of ways, not only because of the Epstein files and the, his fear of that, but also recognizing how many ways in which he is failing, and that I think be it the economy or otherwise, and I think that has the effect with that guy, and we've seen it before, that it makes him more inclined to go to whatever he thinks is the most extreme way to grab attention and exploit people's fears.
Yeah, the more he falls, the more dangerous he gets.
Yeah. So, Joe, I mean, is it crazy to say?
I never thought. Who would have thought you'd see this? I mean,
I know. This is
as much as Stephen saw, and we all saw. Like, this is just, and it's so out there, and still.
So can I do the kind of the quick combination? This weekend, I have to say, between that post and JD Vance, with "I don't give a shit," if you think that we're committing war crimes, with the Department of War, with blowing up a Venezuelan boat with 11 passengers without any real proof of what's going on there, without any approval from Congress or any kind of legal foundations for it. I mean, you put all of these things together, and obviously not only that post, but the other ways that Trump has been talking about waging war against Chicago, and J.B. Pritzker talking about the Texas National Guard coming into Chicago, coming into Illinois to assist his cause. And I have to say, I mean, all of that sort of taken together, sort of led me to say, please, let's not talk about like the coming of fascism, the coming danger. Please, let's talk about its arrival. It's here, and what do we do now?
Yeah. So let me ask, guys, is it crazy to say that on the optimistic side, that when you look at every poll, Trump is underwater on every single issue? He's not. I don't know if we've seen anything really like this, where you have someone who 6 months after election on a signature issue, immigration, is underwater on immigration.
Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Well, look, the Zogby poll, interesting question. They asked, are you ashamed that, George Bush or Clinton or Trump is your president? Over a majority of Americans, 2 polls in a row, said they're ashamed that Donald Trump's their president. What's interesting about that is the first time he started asking that question during the Monica Lewinsky scandal under the Clinton administration. It's asked it every time through. And the president that's performed the worst now in terms of more Americans being ashamed, a majority of them, is about Donald Trump. So that it's definitely real. that his approvals are going down, and like you said, even on his sort of core issues, he's faltering. But I'm with Stephen. I think it's almost like at that point, it's almost driving him faster. Like, oh, we got to speed up the authoritarian, getting the idea of getting troops into the street. We got to go into more cities sooner than we thought. I mean, it's amplifying his need to grab absolute power and to speed it up. And the question is, at what point do the American people, this Democratic Party, realize it's not just another election? There's this authoritarian grab going on, and stop thinking about itself as a party, but leading a pro-democracy movement in the streets that's peaceful, but out there and visible. The American that group, that people that are ashamed of this guy, actually show that, be visible about it, and start to shut it down. But that's the thing that I just wish more. I just wish the party. I mean, other leaders, not just the party, but other people out there. And as Stephen said, looking at companies and law firms, everybody bowing instead of getting out there and saying no more.
That's what those tech CEOs of these great American companies, who are all vastly wealthy, vastly successful, because of an American system that Donald Trump is directly trying to undermine on every front. I just got to put a little caveat here. In 2000, when I was working on the Bush campaign, the only thing that really worked for us was the promise to restore honor and dignity to the White House. And that was after Monica Lewinsky, which seems so quaint now.
Where characters seem to somehow still matter. My God.
And
that was before the Epstein cartoon.
Now we have the president's criminal personal lawyer. I mean, the idea that the president has a criminal lawyer, still, and goes down and meets with the most notorious child sex trafficker of our time to cut a sweetheart deal to move her to a yoga place. To serve. It's really, I've, as the resident former Republican here, I think it just proves that our party never believed in anything in this configuration. And I think, and it's sort of a separate discussion, but I've been thinking about this a lot. I think there was something about what we did in the Republican Party that rewarded weakness and compliance, that you rose in the party through weakness and compliance. It was your turn. You waited, you went. And to buck the system was negative. And you do that for decades, and it's sort of a genetic breeding experiment. What do you end up with? You end up with, a guy who's a doctor, Cassidy from Louisiana, who, as a young doctor, was passionately involved with helping schools get vaccine programs, particularly underprivileged schools. And when he got elected to the state Senate, this was a big issue of his, to his credit. And now this is a guy that's giving us to RFK Jr.
So,
I just, wow.
Careerists, people who think the old melody. I don't need to dump on the Democrats as sort of part of the same complex, because I think there are people who are pushing back and who are opposing and who are trying to do something. But I think, as you're suggesting, it's almost ingrained, this reluctance to disrupt, to sort of to go along with whoever is in power, because you're going to benefit from it, whether the country suffers for it or not. And I think it's, I think it's one of the reasons why I'm looking more and finding more reasons for hope or uplift coming at the state level around the country, and particularly, J.B. Pritzker in Chicago and in Illinois, and, obviously Gavin Newsom in California, and Rob Ferguson in Washington. And, we sort of see, there are 23 Democratic governors They do represent a coalition if you sort of begin to put them together, and there starts to already be some of these coalitions like the Health Alliance that Oregon, Washington, and California has pursued, sort of recognizing how insane this, anti-vax policy is going to be and how dangerous it is for their people.
Yeah, I mean, I think I haven't done this exact math, but wouldn't it be a true statement that more Americans have Democrat governors than Republican governors? If you put the total populations together, I would think so. You have California, you have New York, you have Pennsylvania,
Massachusetts, I think.
Massachusetts, these big states.
Well, Texas and Florida are the other. I mean, it'd be close, probably.
That'd be an interesting thing to find out.
Mm.
I did, for what it's worth, one of the things when I was writing my last book, I came across a stat that I thought was fascinating, that in the history of the Supreme Court, there's been 5 Supreme Court justices who were confirmed by senators who represent less than a majority of the country's population. And all 5 are on the Supreme Court right now. I mean, it says so much about where we were. And let's talk about this latest. I mean, it seems to me that the Supreme Court now has, like said, great with racial profiling.
Yeah.
I
thought that was unconstitutional.
I don't understand it. That if this is why
it was unconstitutional.
I thought equal justice under the law was sort of kind of a fundamental principle.
Yeah, I'm writing a piece now. It's kind of an open letter to Brett Kavanaugh. We worked on the Bush campaign, different areas, but I ran across Brett now and again. And there were a lot of Hispanics who worked in the Bush campaign. This was a passion of Bush's. He was trying to learn Spanish. I mean, it was something that he really believed in. And there were a lot of Spanish, native speaking Hispanics, a lot of them first-generation Americans, some who had immigrated, who worked in this campaign. So I was just thinking now, Brett, buddy, like these guys we used to work with. So if they like living around DC and they have to go to a Home Depot, you want them to have to run fast to go get that power drill? Because if, they're Hispanic and they speak Spanish, they could get arrested, like or whatever happens, detained.
They don't have their papers on them.
Whatever. So, maybe, Brett, you're supposed to be a good guy. Is it okay if they call you and ask you to run errands on the weekend for them, to where it's safe for you to go out? Because no one's going to bother you.
Yeah.
It's just it's such a betrayal of, well, obviously what it means to be American, but such a betrayal of what, at least in Bush world, a lot of us thought we believed in. And
can I add one note about the part of the way in which the betrayal is especially ugly is that not only that the Supreme Court turns out to be partisan, oh surprise, but in this last period, I mean, I was looking at sort of the data 2022, 2023 in terms of the number of rulings that went through the shadow docket, the emergency rulings, and there were 44. 2024, 2025, sort of through June, 133. So more than triple, right? So or it's almost exactly triple, and it tells you that they don't even, lack of deliberation and lack of full hearings, not the kind of proper briefings, that they're already sort of so reactive in their decision making. They don't even need to take time to sort of think through the actual issues or the evidence.
Let's just talk about this a second, because it sort of is a piece of something that we've all talked about a lot. I wrote about it recently. Assuming the Democrats will win the House, what should they do? And it seems to me that you could have posited that, well, after disastrous Trump, this turmoil, this craziness, that a normal, sane governing party could act like a normal, sane governing party, remind Americans this is what they really liked. Trumpism was an aberration, and would be rewarded for it. The only problem is we tried that with Biden, and it didn't work, and 7 million fewer people. But on that list of things, it seems to me, I can't think of an easier public opinion campaign to win than expanding the Supreme Court? Why is it that the only part of the American judiciary should have the same number of judges that we had when we were 1/5 the size of this country? I mean, I just think that you could carry the day on this on every front. That, as you say, you have this huge country now, all of these cases, they clearly can't give them enough attention. So they're not addressing a lot of issues that probably should be addressed. They're cherry picking what they always do, but cherry picking in this way very ideologically what they address. And, you know, a Supreme Court where you have two guys who went to the same prep school, who one dad was a lobbyist and the other mom was a cabinet member. You know, maybe this isn't the America, doesn't represent much of America. And, you know, I think the Democrats need to start talking about these big, bold things that they will do once they're in office. I mean, is that crazy?
Okay, Joe, you want to go or you want me to jump in? I got a couple of wild thoughts here.
Yeah, go with your wild thoughts. I'll jump in right after.
Okay, so I may be jumping a little bit ahead to 2029. You know, once we're there's somebody there to begin to clean the stain. That's what I'm thinking a lot about. And you know, I agree that there needs to be, you know, hearings, and there needs to be other things. There needs to be the disbanding of the new January 6th committee investigation, which is now, you know, meant to whitewash what actually happened in 2021. But I'm, you know, to put it in a maybe extreme way, I've been in my search for uplift, I've been reading about the Nuremberg trials and the number of Nazis who were convicted at the top levels and were hanged. You know, there were a few that chose to commit suicide the day before, including Goering. But the point is, you know, there was a system put in place to hold some of these people who committed crimes against humanity and other crimes, to hold them accountable. And my view is that we're largely in this mess because of the failure to hold, you know, right, Donald Trump and Absolutely. The top level people responsible, you know, after January 6th. And you know, I think Joe Biden, maybe it was one of his most fatal mistakes, which was to put in place Merrick Garland, who I was optimistic, hopeful. He was actually talking about the Nuremberg trial and Robert Jackson, who was like the lead prosecutor, that, you know, and the sort of the intention to prosecute people at every level, you know, where the facts take us. And he never got there. He ran out of time before this happened. I mean, somebody who never should have been allowed to ever run for public office again after inciting that, you know, deadly insurrection. And, you know, and he was able to do that. And so in some ways, that's the, you know, if there's an original sin of the last 4 years, that might be it.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I mean, I was not a supporter of Garland being picked. I was out there trying to get Doug Jones. I was hoping he was going to end up being the Attorney General, but that's all. Look, I actually, Stuart, think that the problem here is will we get beyond 2026? In other words, you know, what on paper, with his favorables being low and the number of people saying they're ashamed of him and all that, yeah, we should, you know, the Democrats and people who care about democracy should win in 2026. But I think, like I said, I think what's happened is it's kind of sped up the pace. Maybe they weren't going to do some of this until after 2026, but now I think they know they can't win. That's what Texas was about, with the grab of 5 seats. Sure. I think that has a lot to do with why the troops are in the streets and finding more reasons to get them even deeper and normalize it, that they're there. So when the ballot, but they'll be standing in ballot around ballot boxes and intimidating people for the vote. And I don't. I really think that it is going to take millions of people in the street, a party, along with Adam Kinzinger and anybody else out there, regardless of party, who actually starts to mobilize and tell people that we've got to show that that before 2026, build a movement that grows by the millions every demonstration, and rallies a literally overpowering victory in 2026. I mean, it can't be like a 2-point thing or a 140,000 votes somewhere. That's not going to happen. They're going to, already going for paper ballots, all that stuff. Trying to end mail voting. A lot. I mean, some of this, it is. I agree with Stephen that the one piece of optimism is that the states will be controlling most of that, but the Democratic states may not enforce whatever crazy thing that he has going, but Republicans will. And on top, so those districts will be, will have an added foot on them. I just think we've got to mobilize enough people and wake. Literally, I think part of it too is a lot of people still today, with war on Chicago, War Department, troops in the street, still don't believe it can happen here when it is happening here in front of their eyes. It's a normalcy bias. They don't want to believe that is part of the process. So we have as leaders in the Democratic Party, challengers, office holders, former people that have left, like Adam Kinzinger, Gavin Pritzker, et cetera. You're seeing some of this, but it's got to become like, from the bottom up, an uprising of the American people that says no, not enough.
I think Trump has always benefited from the inability to imagine Donald Trump.
Yeah.
Which certainly in 2016 I fell prey to. I didn't think he'd win the primary. I didn't think he'd win the general. And then I think this clicked in after 21, January 6th. It was unimaginable that he would come back. But he did. And
there's a basic equation, which is that whatever is your worst assumption, go a little bit farther and you're going to get closer, because there is no bottom, and he always proves that he's capable and willing and ready to go even lower. The failure of that to sink in is hard to believe at this point.
Charlie Sykes was writing about this, that the point that you made, Stephen, that okay, Republican Party cave, but what would have been more difficult to foresee is the Columbia University cave. The CEO of Apple presenting a piece of gold to Donald Trump.
Tribute.
I mean, it to have these. I just don't. I don't understand it. What do you get out of this? How does this help your? I mean, Apple has more cash on hand than the budget of Ireland. What do they need Donald Trump for? It's just astounding to me.
Please, Joe.
No, I was going to say, look, part of this, I think we have to start having economic strikes and things. I mean, I'm not talking about one company. I'm just like, no, we're not playing. We're not playing. Buy what you need, but don't buy anything else. I mean, I don't know how to, somehow we got to put pressure on. They're more afraid of him than they are of us. It's the same way the Republicans in the House and Senate are more afraid of him, more afraid of the MAGA in their primaries than they are of us in the general.
Yeah.
And that's the same with if you're a company. I mean, basically what happened was you put the most powerful force in the world, the president of the United States has in the hands of this madman, who now using that power to scare the living daylights and threaten every company, every other country, everything. And they're all falling, not because of the power we have. I mean, it's literally us that they're afraid of, and they're afraid because we did it. We gave it to. I mean, when you go overseas, we got to take it away in a peaceful way, but by showing that
it remains true that there's an awful lot more of us than there are of not only of Trump, but of the whole
Yes.
whole cult of the whole, MAGA movement, of the whole kind of, despotic regime. And but the solidarity of that, the coalition of that, and the willingness for people to, not be indifferent or not to be comfortable, to be willing to act in some way, whether it's just simply speaking out or whether it's participating in public demonstrations. It's great that there's going to be one, October 18th, no kings, and I'm hoping it's double what it was before.
Yeah.
So now it's over 10 million, and we get closer to 12 million and 3.5% of the population. But the truth is, in my view, one fantastic day of protest isn't going to be what moves things.
No, we got to get to those numbers and then keep the foot on the brake. Put the brakes on this thing, get more people out there and sustain it. And that's, economically and other ways. Every tool we've got to for Democrats in the House and Senate to slow the gears. Just everything to stop this, and it's going to take the people. That's what it's going to take. In my opinion.
Can I ask both of you? Are you surprised that there hasn't been any one of the many things we've already talked about that would be enough of a catalyst to motivate that that mobilization? And do you look to anything in particular as being what might be that catalyst?
What do you think, Joe?
No, there's all kinds of. There's a poll that asked people, "Have you felt the urge to protest?" 67% of Americans said yes. And they all have different reasons. Police in the streets, or troops in the streets, or row, or whatever. But they also went down and then asked that 67% why. And why not? Okay, but you haven't. Why not? And no one asked me. I don't know what to do. There's no leader. It was all these different things about a readiness. But that's why I say it's like if every incumbent Democratic senator and Democratic member of Congress and every challenger, instead of they're not at the no game, like literally before the no, they should be out there right now urging every constituent in their district. If you care about what's happening, if you don't want troops in the streets, if you want Medicaid to be all this stuff, be at the No Kings rally, in October. And if you had and Adam Kinzer, everybody, if all of us in the movement were doing that, I think millions of more Americans would show up, which, by the way, would get more leaders out there and more people, and it would snowball. But that's the thing that has amazed me is that I think too many people in the party are still thinking 2026 is an election and we'll get them there. Even people out there, they don't I'll just vote.
Lifetime away.
So, yeah, and that's when we get there, and they've pulled all these other strings. So no, it's got to happen now. And I think that's what I've looked at the numbers on this stuff. There are actually plenty, as you said, there are more of us than there are of them. We're even more motivated. Like when you look at the special state Senate elections in Iowa, I'm sure Joni Ernst, after the last defeat, had a poll that immediately said to her she's in trouble, so she decides she's not running anymore. There are things that are really happening, but I think we've got to somehow answer something. Here's what you need to do. Here's where you go. Have leaders out there that are saying it's important to be there in October. And then, by the way, at those things, start talking about we need to keep you. This is not enough. You came here today.
Right.
By the way, you came here today, find one more person, one more friend, one more coworker, bring them out next week, and literally start to build this thing.
One thing that, just to kind of wrap things up here, Jonathan Last wrote, some time ago, I think he's brilliant. Everybody should read him in the Bulwark, that you really needed to think, the Democratic Party really needed to think of itself as a dissident movement, not as an opposition governing party. And one element, when you look at the history of dissident movements everywhere, is sort of an underground literature, an underground writing. And that's why what Stephen's doing every day with America is so important. That's why that Trippi show that Joe has, the podcast, is so important. It's what we're trying to do here at Lincoln Square. And these are the equivalent of people who would go out and mimeograph or put things up on the wall, or Thomas Paine did, nail it to the wall. That you realize when you read this that you're not alone.
Mm-hmm.
And it helps formulate thoughts. It gives you something to talk about your friends with. I mean, there's a whole universe out there, people, which I find very endearing, who every day email back and forth Helen Cox Richardson, and they have like little seminars of what she says. So, when a formerly obscure history professor can develop an audience of over 5 million, I think that's just extraordinarily encouraging. But we need to do these things and to keep supporting it, because clearly there has been a massive failure of journalism here.
Yeah.
And none of us are media haters, but I think you have generations of journalists who were raised that the greatest good was objectivity.
Yeah.
And they came to this and they still don't know how to deal with it. And you see these awful things that are happening, like with CBS. ABC bent the knee to Trump. I mean, there's just when you had network news becoming a business, it gave the ability of network news to be independent completely taken away, because you have a president that can put pressure on the business side of it. So anyway, look, we could go on all day, but we should wrap this up. But
I was going to just say, Stuart, that's why, like when I said, find one more friend, one more coworker, to come on. The other thing is, the easier thing right now would be get them to read America, get them to follow Steve,
yes,
get them to do what we're trying to do here on Lincoln Square. I mean, it's to get as many
engage.
Yes.
And then speak out, speak to your own neighbors and your friends, and share it, and do all of the things that maybe, rouses some people that are at this point just comfortable and don't see it to be their problem. I think that's, there was I'll try to do this very quickly. There's a book, and I'm forgetting exactly the name, but I think it was Milton Meyer who wrote it. And he went to Germany in like the early 1950s, and he interviewed lots of sort of everyday Germans who were kind of tangentially connected to the Nazis, but not exactly. And one of the things that he discovered was that most of them did just fine during the whole Nazi period, and it never really, all the things all the atrocities that we focus on now in terms of that period, they didn't feel touched by it, and so they weren't motivated to oppose it in any way. And so I think there's, we have different communication now, and I think people have the ability to maybe to pierce some of these information silos, I hope, but I think part of the thing is to convince people that if there are, masked men kidnapping people in the streets and, shipping them off in unmarked cars and off to other countries, that may be you next. And there's a reason to take that seriously. And there's a reason for that to cause you to mobilize, yourself.
Yeah. All right. Well, look, on that, I think it is a positive note, because I think that so much of this is still in our hands. And if you go back to Timothy Snyder's On Tyranny, the first rule, I think, is do not obey in advance, which is what we're seeing again and again and again happening. But we're not, and everybody watching this isn't. And our circle of friends, and you can expand it and do exactly what Joe says. And it is very important at this point that Stephen's making about that, and Joe too, that we're more of us. This is something I remember in 20, we at the Lincoln Project had a couple of conversations with Ann Applebaum, who, is somebody I go around handing out her books like Watchtowers, to random strangers in airports. She was talking about how she saw the power that the right wing was able in Eastern Europe to give a sense that they had this mass support when they really didn't. And that it was kind of a bandwagon effect, and how important it is to oppose that. So look, subscribe to and read Stephen, America. Follow, download Joe's that Trippi show. Thank you for subscribing to Lincoln Square. If you can get other friends to subscribe, that it would be tremendously helpful. There's no billionaires here that are going to save us. And thank each of you for caring enough to show up and to do and to believe and to think and to be troubled, because it is a time to be troubled, but it's a time to act. So thank you. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thanks, Stephen.
Pleasure.